All right, welcome to the deep dive, everybody. You folks have sent in some really intriguing material, and I think today we're going to plunge into some pretty fascinating stuff. It's all about the connection between kind of our inner world, our thoughts, and how that shapes not only our actions but also our broader journey of spiritual growth.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's a concept that one of your sources captures perfectly with this powerful statement: "We are what we think."
It's remarkable how this idea echoes across these diverse perspectives, right? I mean, we have this vivid encounter between a samurai and a monk, reflections on how we even perceive those who have passed away, and a detailed exploration of the principles underpinning spiritual transformation.
Right, right.
And ultimately, they all converge on this significant impact that our kind of internal landscape has on our external experience and our spiritual path.
Exactly, yeah. So our aim in this deep dive is to really dig into these ideas and to really extract the most crucial understandings about self-purification and how our inner state profoundly influences both our present and potential future,
Yeah, for
drawing
sure.
exclusively from the insights within your provided material.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's dive right in with that striking parable of the samurai the monk.
Yeah, you know what immediately grabs you about that story is the sheer immediacy of the monk's teaching, right? You have this powerful, likely imperious samurai um, making a demand of a monk who, on the surface, seems quite vulnerable.
Right.
And the monk's response, it isn't what the samurai expects. It's deliberately provocative.
And it hits its mark, doesn't it? The
Absolutely.
samurai is instantly engulfed in fury, his sword's drawn, ready,
Yeah.
and it's this intense, almost instantaneous rush of anger that the monk identifies as hell, right? It's not some far-off place of torment,
Right.
but the very state of mind the samurai has plunged it into in that very moment.
Yeah, that's the point he's trying to make.
Right,
Makes sense.
absolutely. So for our listener, what practical techniques might these sources suggest for recognizing these hellish states arising in their own minds and perhaps shifting towards a more peaceful inner experience in their daily interactions?
Well, that's the crucial question. The parable really highlights, I think, the power of our immediate reaction.
Right,
And while the source offers specific techniques in this particular story, it does underscore the need for self-awareness.
right.
Recognizing that trigger, in this case, the monk's words and the subsequent emotional storm, that's got to be the first step, right?
Yeah,
Perhaps other parts of the material will offer more on cultivating that awareness, but in this moment, the lesson is the direct link between a thought, the perceived insult, and a powerful emotional state.
right. It's a stark illustration.
For sure.
And then when the samurai, perhaps startled by the monk's composure or, recognizing the truth in his words, he lowers his sword and a wave of calm kind of washes over him.
Yeah.
And that the monk points out is heaven, again, a present internal state brought about by a shift in thought and emotion.
Yeah.
It's not earned through some grand deed, but through a change in inner posture.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And the source uses this powerful image to underscore, I think, a broader point about the spiritual path, the necessity of humility and inner cleansing.
Right.
That initial rage in the samurai is presented as something that needs to be overcome, like a barrier to any deeper spiritual understanding.
Right. So this brings up an interesting point about how we see ourselves and others.
Okay.
The source then pivots to a very common experience, attending a funeral.
Yeah.
Take a moment to consider that with us.
Okay.
What are some of the typical ways that people are remembered at these events?
It's almost universally positive, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
I mean, we tend to focus on the good qualities and often even exaggerating them and conveniently overlooking any flaws or less admirable traits.
Sure, sure.
The picture painted is often someone, bordering on sainthood.
Right, and what's fascinating here is the contrast the source draws with a potentially different reality that might emerge later. For example, when a will is disclosed,
Oh, yeah.
suddenly motivations and character traits that weren't mentioned in the eulogy might come to light.
Sure.
It highlights the difference between public perception and private reality.
Exactly. And the key insight here is that neither the glowing tributes nor the contents of a will can retroactively change who that person was in life, right? I mean, death isn't this magical transformation that suddenly alters intellect, personality, or fundamental character.
Right.
The source argues that the seeds of who we are, our thoughts, desires, and actions, are sown in life
Right.
and continue to bear fruit even beyond death.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture of our spiritual journey, the source suggests that our state after death isn't some arbitrary judgment or assignment. Instead, it's a direct continuation of the mental, emotional, and spiritual condition we cultivated while living.
Yeah,
We essentially shed the physical body, like discarding an old coat,
right.
But our inner landscape remains fundamentally the same.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, this has interesting implications for the idea of contacting deceased loved ones.
It does.
The source even uses the relatable example of Uncle Bill at a seance,
Yeah,
making the point that if he wasn't particularly insightful or wise during his life, simply passing away isn't going to suddenly grant him, profound wisdom to impart from beyond.
right.
It cautions against idealizing the departed.
Absolutely.
And that's a really grounding perspective.
It is.
The source also includes a somewhat sobering observation about how quickly the intensity of mourning can fade, quoting Wordsworth's analogy of a boat disappearing over the horizon, out of sight, out of mind. It speaks to the transient nature of even our deepest grief in the face of life's ongoing momentum.
Yeah.
And, this understanding of life's impermanence, even in our memories of loved ones, perhaps underscores the urgency of actively engaging in our own spiritual journey. Which brings us to the source's discussion of initiation as a commitment.
Okay, yeah.
What's significant about this concept of initiation, according to the text, is that it's presented as a profound commitment demanding tangible changes.
Yeah.
It's not merely a symbolic ritual. It signifies a deliberate turning point on the path of spiritual growth.
Right.
The source emphasizes a willingness to actively reshape one's lifestyle, behavior, and overall conduct, regardless of the challenges that may arise.
Right.
It sounds like a really comprehensive undertaking.
It is. It is.
The source states that it involves a complete transformation of our thoughts, our words, and our deeds.
Right.
It's not enough to just think kind thoughts. It necessitates living in a way that consistently reflects those thoughts in our actions and interactions.
Yeah, you're right. And this leads us directly to the principle that sound moral conduct forms the very bedrock of spiritual life, according to your source.
Right.
What's particularly interesting here is the reasoning provided. It's not simply about adhering to a set of external rules for their own sake.
Right. Yeah, the source clarifies that this emphasis on morality isn't just about being conventionally good.
Right.
It's about actively preparing the inner ground for spiritual growth to take root and flourish.
Yeah.
It's seen as a necessary foundation upon which deeper spiritual understanding can be built.
It's the groundwork.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. The analogy of the farmer diligently preparing the soil is particularly illuminating here.
Right.
Just consider it. You can't expect a healthy harvest by simply scattering seeds on unprepared ground.
Right.
The farmer must first plow, enrich the soil of nutrients, protect it with fences, and provide consistent watering. Similarly, our daily conduct, our thoughts, actions, and interactions, this constitutes the soil for our spiritual development.
Right.
We must actively cultivate and refine it.
Yeah, that analogy really makes the abstract idea of spiritual growth feel much more grounded in our everyday choices.
For sure, for sure.
And the source is quite direct, stating that Saint Mat, the spiritual tradition the text draws from, is fundamentally about making these changes.
Right.
About a continuous process of self-purification.
Yeah.
It acknowledges our inherent starting point as beings with imperfections, weaknesses, often feeling like slaves of the mind and the senses.
Right.
For a listener unfamiliar with Saint Mat, could you offer a brief understanding of its general emphasis as presented in these sources?
Certainly. Based on this material, Saint Mat emphasizes a path of conscious inner transformation.
Okay.
Through ethical living, self-discipline, and practices aimed at connecting with an inner divine reality.
Right.
And the purification of thoughts, words, and deeds is presented as a crucial aspect of this journey.
Right. That provides helpful context.
Okay, good.
And this idea of our inherent imperfections leads into another compelling analogy presented in the source, the rough diamond.
Okay.
What aspects of this comparison stand out to you?
The core of the analogy lies in the recognition that while we possess intrinsic value, like a rough diamond, that brilliance is often obscured by layers of impurities.
Right.
The diamond requires a process of washing, polishing, and precise cutting to remove the flaws and allow its inherent light to shine fully.
Exactly.
Right.
And the source directly connects this to our human condition, suggesting that we are stained with the karmas of past actions and ingrained habits that act as those obscuring
For
impurities.
sure.
Right. And the process of initiation in this context can be seen as the commencement of that transformative process,
Yeah.
the initial washing and polishing to reveal our true potential.
Absolutely, which brings us back full circle to that central, powerful assertion, we are what we think.
Right.
It's a remarkably concise statement, yet it carries profound implications for understanding ourselves and our place in the world.
What resonates so strongly is the directness of that statement, amplified by the accompanying quote from the Buddha. All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make our world. It really underscores the immense creative power held within our own minds.
Yeah, for sure. The source identifies the mind as the most vital tool we possess, emphasizing that every action we take, every choice we make, it originates in our thoughts.
Right.
Our external behavior is simply a reflection of our internal mental landscape.
And this extends beyond our individual actions, doesn't it?
It does.
The source draws a connection between individual thought patterns and the larger scale issues we observe in the world, turmoil, chaos, conflict, suggesting that these widespread problems ultimately have their roots in the collective thoughts and attitudes of individuals.
Uh,
It's a sobering perspective, implying a significant responsibility for our inner states.
It really is.
Yeah, and shifting to a more personal level, the source touches upon the growing body of evidence that suggests a strong link between our mental and emotional states and our physical health.
Okay.
What's compelling here is that even while acknowledging potential differing viewpoints on the extent of this connection, the source offers relatable, everyday examples.
Okay.
Think about the common experience of losing your appetite after receiving upsetting news, or the very real physical reactions we experience during moments of intense fear or stress.
Yeah, I mean, these are such universal experiences.
They are.
The tightening in your chest when you're anxious, the physical trembling when frightened.
Right.
I mean, it's difficult to deny some form of powerful interaction between our mental states and our bodily functions.
Right. Yeah.
And the source offers a rather direct piece of advice in this context. If you would perfect your body, you have to guard your mind.
This really emphasizes that our thoughts aren't just, abstract mental occurrences.
Right.
They have tangible consequences that extend to our physical well-being.
They do.
The source suggests that harboring negative thoughts like, malice, envy, and disappointment can actually have a detrimental impact on our bodies.
Yeah,
While cultivating pure and positive thoughts can have the opposite effect.
for sure.
So considering all these interconnected ideas, where does the source ultimately lead us?
Well, good question.
It culminates in a discussion about aspiring to what it terms godlike perfection. And this sounds like an exceptionally high standard to aim for.
It certainly does. The source clarifies that achieving union with the divine necessitates becoming godlike, defining that as a state of absolute, complete 100% perfection.
Right.
Essentially, Santmat, as presented here, is a path dedicated to striving towards this ultimate ideal of godlikeness.
And the masters within this tradition are presented as playing a vital role in this aspiration, aren't they?
They are. They are.
They serve as tangible embodiments of this perfection, acting as role models for those on the path.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
The source encourages a deep study of the lives and teachings of these masters, urging us to observe and emulate their qualities of purity, unwavering devotion, boundless love, and profound compassion.
Right.
This provides a practical framework for understanding and pursuing that ideal of godlike perfection.
So it's not just about abstract philosophical concepts.
Right.
It's about having real-world examples to guide our efforts towards inner transformation.
Right.
And the ultimate goal, according to the text, is to attain a state of inner purity and focused concentration
Right.
that allows for a direct experience of the divine reality within our own being.
Right.
It all comes back to that fundamental work of inner purification we discussed earlier.
Right. And the source concludes with that beautiful quote from George Granville: portraying the truly happy individual as someone possessing a tranquil mind, free from selfish desires and living in a state of inner peace.
Yeah.
It paints a compelling picture of the inner state that this dedicated journey of purification and transformation can ultimately lead to.
So as we bring this deep dive to a close,
Yeah,
several key insights from your sources really stand out.
right,
The profound and pervasive influence of our thoughts
right.
on shaping our present experience and future possibilities, it's undeniable.
Yeah,
The ongoing commitment to inner purification and transformation
yeah,
is presented not as a suggestion, but as a fundamental necessity for spiritual growth.
right,
And the cultivation of sound moral conduct
right.
is emphasized as the essential groundwork upon which any lasting spiritual development can be built.
Indeed, and considering the immense power your source attributes to our thoughts, it prompts a really intriguing question for you, our listener. What small, intentional shift in your thinking could you experiment with today to cultivate a little more of that inner heaven, as the monk so vividly demonstrated?
Right.
Or reflecting on the farmer's analogy, what specific aspect of your daily conduct, that inner soil of thoughts, words, and deeds, might benefit most from your conscious cultivation right now?
Powerful avenues for personal reflection.
They are.
Thank you for sharing these deeply insightful sources with us and for joining us on this deep dive into their wisdom.
Absolutely. Until our next exploration together, thank you for listening.